My name is Leo. For as long as I can remember, a whisper has followed me. It wasn't a spooky ghost kind of whisper, more like a feeling in my gut. It told me I was meant for something big, something important. It said, "Leo, you will be the strongest in the world." Now, you might think that's a pretty strange thing for a kid who was better at tripping over his own feet than anything else. I grew up in a small village nestled by a river, a place where the biggest excitement was the annual turnip festival. But that whisper was louder than any festival music. It was a constant hum beneath the surface of my ordinary life, a promise of a future filled with adventure and glory. This dream wasn't about being a bully or showing off. I had seen bigger kids push around smaller ones. I had seen merchants get cheated by thugs. I had seen helplessness in the eyes of my neighbors when a storm washed out the bridge. To me, being the strongest meant no one could ever make you feel small. It meant you could protect the people you cared about. When I was old enough, I left my village. I said goodbye to my worried parents and the familiar river. The whisper led me to a place called the Valley of 1,000 Falls. The name wasn't an exaggeration. Water cascaded down every cliff face, a constant roar that filled the air. Legend said anyone who could train amidst that chaos would develop unparalleled focus and strength. My first challenge: climb the slick, moss-covered cliffs while the spray tried to push me back down. My hands, raw and bleeding, would slip. My feet would lose their purchase. I'd slide down, landing in a heap in the cold pools below. I spent more time in the water than on the rock. The roar of the falls was deafening. Every evening, I'd huddle by a small fire, my body aching and my spirit bruised. I tried different approaches. I tried climbing fast. I failed. I tried climbing slowly. I failed. I watched the mountain goats leap from ledge to ledge. They were born for this environment. I was just a clumsy intruder. One afternoon, after a nasty fall that twisted my ankle, I just lay there in the mud. I was done. But as I lay there, something small caught my eye. A tiny, bright green sprout was pushing its way through a crack in a rock. It was bent, but it wasn't broken. It yielded to the water's force but held its ground. A thought sparked. Maybe I was doing it all wrong. Maybe strength wasn't about fighting the waterfall head-on. Maybe it was about understanding its rhythm and finding a way to move with it instead of against it. My ankle still throbbed, but for the first time in weeks, the whisper in my heart felt like it had a new word to say. With my ankle healed, I returned to the cliffs, but with a new mindset. I wasn't there to conquer the waterfall. I was there to learn from it. I stopped thinking about the top and started focusing on each individual movement. I felt the slickness of the moss, not as an obstacle, but as a fact. I listened to the rhythm of the water, not as a roar, but as a pulse. I began to move between the streams of water, using the brief moments of less pressure to advance. It was a slow, painstaking dance. My progress was measured in inches, not feet. The goats were still my teachers. I watched how they placed their hooves and used their entire bodies to balance. The world's strongest man probably didn't get his start by pretending to be a goat. But here I was, and it was working. Slowly, painstakingly, I was making my way higher than ever before. One day, I finally reached the top of the first major cliff. I collapsed onto the flat, sun-drenched rock, exhausted but exhilarated. I had done it. My body was a roadmap of my failures. Scars on my hands, bruises on my legs, a lingering ache in my ankle. This wasn't the clean, glorious strength I had imagined. It was messy. It was painful. It was humbling. The whisper in my heart was still there, but it felt different now. Less of a boast and more of a quiet acknowledgement of the hard road ahead. This new feeling was solidified a week later. I saw a young deer trapped on a ledge, its leg caught in a tangle of thorny vines. It was panicking, and its struggles were only making the vines tighter. My first instinct was to use my newfound strength to just rip the vines apart. But I remembered the lesson of the waterfall. Rushing in would only scare the animal more. Instead, I climbed carefully, speaking in a low, calm voice. I didn't break the vines. I carefully untangled them one by one. It looked at me for a moment before bounding away. My armor of ambition had its first crack, letting in a little light. My reputation, small as it was, began to travel beyond the valley. People heard tales of a young man who could climb the impossible cliffs. This led me to my next challenge and my greatest teacher. His name was Kale. They said he was once the strongest warrior in the 5 kingdoms, but now he just tended a small garden and watched the clouds. Instead, I found a man who looked as weathered as the mountain itself.
You wish to be the strongest in the world.
He asked, Can you lift the weight of a person's sorrow? Kale's lessons continued to be strange, kind of profound. He never asked me to lift a boulder. He asked me to sit with one, feel its history. Centuries of sun, centuries of rain. It has a strength you can't measure with your arms. He taught me to meditate, to quiet the noise and just listen to the world around me. The strongest warriors weren't the loudest. They could hear a pin drop in a hurricane. One day, a messenger showed up, breathless and panicked. A group of miners from a nearby village was trapped. A tunnel had collapsed. A massive rock was blocking the entrance, way too big for any 10 men to move. The villagers had heard of my feats and begged for my help. This was it. This was the moment my dream was made for.
Remember the wildflowers, Leo?
Go be strong. When I arrived, the scene was one of pure despair. Families were weeping. Miners exhausted from futile efforts. I placed my hands on it, just as Kale had taught me with the smaller stones. I closed my eyes and tried to listen. I pushed with everything I had. The rock didn't budge, not even a millimeter. Panic started to set in. I noticed hairline cracks and how it was wedged. It wasn't about a single heroic push. Strength was understanding, applying pressure in the right place. I explained my idea to the weary miners. Instead of all of us pushing against the massive face, we would focus our efforts elsewhere. I asked for their sharpest pickaxes and their heaviest sledgehammers. Some were skeptical. It seemed impossible to break something so large. We concentrated our force along the largest fissure. Understanding the object was the key. It wasn't a single glorious act, but a collective repetitive effort. I worked alongside them, my muscles burning, my hands blistering. I wasn't a hero standing above them. I was one of them. With every strike, I felt a connection to these men, a shared purpose more powerful than any individual effort. Hours passed. The sun beat down on us. Then, with a deafening crack that silenced the canyon, the fissure widened. A huge chunk of the rock broke away. A cheer went up. Hope rekindled. We redoubled our efforts. Piece by piece, we broke the monolith apart. It wasn't one person's strength. It was the combined focused strength of a community. Finally, we broke through. A small opening appeared, and soon we heard faint cries from within. As we pulled the last man into the arms of his weeping family, I felt a sense of fulfillment deeper than any personal victory. Lifting the rock would have made me a legend, but teaching others how to break it made me part of their story. The cheers were not just for me, they were for everyone. News of the mine rescue spread like wildfire. The stories weren't just about my strength. They were about my cleverness and leadership. A warlord named Volos heard the tales. He ruled the northern wastes with an iron fist. He sent a challenge demanding single combat to prove who was truly the strongest. To refuse would mean he would bring his army and burn the villages I had helped. Kale listened as I told him the news, his face unreadable. My journey north was a somber one. The landscape grew harsher. The villages I passed were grim and silent. I saw the fear in people's eyes. This was the kind of strong I had always despised. I found Volos on a barren plateau surrounded by his fiercest warriors. He was a mountain of a man clad in jagged steel, a massive two-handed axe on his shoulder. He laughed when he saw me.
This is the hero? You look like a boy who just learned to climb a hill.
I wasn't as big as him. I saw a bully, and I remembered Kale's words. The strongest tree is not the one that stands rigid, but the one that bends. The duel began. Volos was a whirlwind of destruction. His axe swung in massive, brutal arcs that tore up the ground where they landed. I was a leaf in a hurricane, dodging, weaving, parrying. I couldn't meet his strength head-on. To do so would be suicide. All my training came rushing back. Valley of a Thousand Falls, the dance with the water, the balance of the mountain goat. I was not fighting him. I was moving with him, using his momentum against him. His attacks became more reckless, more predictable. He was all brute force with no thought. I listened as Kale taught me. I heard the whistle of his axe, the grunt of his breath, the shifting of his feet. I saw the openings he left, the moments of imbalance after a furious swing. The fight was long. I was getting tired. He was tiring faster. Finally, he overextended in a wild lunge. It was the opening I had been waiting for. But instead of striking him, I dropped my sword, ducked under his swing, stepped inside his guard, and used his forward momentum to throw him off balance. With a precise strike to a nerve cluster in his shoulder, not for fighting, for control, I made his arm go numb. His axe fell from his grasp with a loud clang. He stared at his useless hand, then at me, eyes wide with disbelief. He was disarmed and vulnerable. His warriors tensed, but he held them back. I stood before him, weaponless. Your strength is a prison, I said in the sudden silence. It isolates you. It brings you nothing but fear. That isn't strength. It's weakness. Volos was defeated, but I did not kill him. I did not take his land or his title. I simply walked away. His men watched me go with a new expression: respect. They had seen a different kind of strength, one that did not need to crush others to prove itself. I returned not to a hero's parade, but to the quiet village by the mine. I helped them rebuild. I taught the children the climbing techniques I had learned, not for fighting, but for fun and reaching the sweetest fruit on the highest branches. I helped a farmer divert a stream to water struggling crops, using lessons about working with nature, not against it. I spent my days helping, building, and teaching. I didn't seek challenges or titles. One evening, as I sat with Kale watching the sunset, he handed me the small wooden bird he had been carving.
Do you still wish to be the strongest in the world, Leo?
I looked out over the peaceful valley. I thought of the miners, the freed deer, the wildflowers growing along the leaky path. I don't know if I am the strongest, Kale, I answered honestly. And I think I don't care anymore. He smiled.
And that is why you are.
The whisper I had chased my whole life was finally silent. It had been replaced by a deep, quiet certainty in my heart. Strength wasn't a destination. It was the courage to be kind and the wisdom to build others up.